Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading Adam of the Road. We began with chapter 1, and it told us mostly about Adam and his friend Perkin, and the school they're living in, and the setting, which is the 1290s in England. And Adam and his father are minstrels. His father has gone to minstrel school in France, and he was expected to be back around sometime after Easter, but it's June and he's still not back yet. So Adam is beginning to worry. Adam also has a dog named Nick that he can't have at school with him, so it's staying with a woman. This chapter 2, Nick. Adam and Perkin were going to see Nick. Adam had saved him part of the meat from dinner, and Perkin had saved him a hunk of bread. That was good of Perkin, for in spite of being so thin, he was always hungrier than Adam and needed to eat more. And Nick wasn't his dog. Besides the food for Nick, which he carried in the leather wallet hung on his belt, Adam had his harp over his shoulder. It was after dinner on St. Albans Day, and the boys were free till supper time. And I have a picture of them at the beginning of the chapter. The curly blonde is Adam, and the dark-haired boy is Perkin. There was no reason why they should not have walked boldly out of the school building, across the court and through the gate. The porter would not have stopped them today. Indeed, with the court so full of people coming and going, the porter would scarcely have noticed two boys, but they had their own way of doing it. Nick was a secret, and they were not going to lead any spies straight to the place where he was kept. To confuse the enemy further, Adam went first, and Perkin followed a few paces behind him. It was part of the proceedings that whatever Adam did, Perkin must do too. If Adam chose to hop 6 times on his left foot, Perkin hopped too. If Adam jumped to touch a branch of the tree hanging over his head, so did Perkin. Adam usually went first because the things that Perkin thought of doing were always the same, but Adam could think of new things. So Adam came out of the school building a little ahead of Perkin, and at once the bright June sunshine and the crowd and the air of holiday making excited him. He snatched off his round green cap, threw it into the air, caught it on his left heel, kicked up behind. Perkin was wearing a linen coif tied under his chin that most men and boys wore. He had to untie it first, and when he threw it up in the air, it went wide and landed in a little heap right on the head of the prior, who had just come out of church. Now, if you don't know what a prior is, that he is someone who has just come out of church, tells you that he was a priest of some kind. They explain a little bit more. The prior was a very important person, second only to the abbot himself, and extremely dignified. Perkin gave a frightened squawk and dived behind a startled old man whose staff and bag and cloak showed that he was a pilgrim. The prior brushed the coif off his head as if it had been a fly and sailed on, his black robes billowing behind him. Adam picked it up and stuffed it down Perkin's neck. "Here, you ninny," he said, crowing with laughter. "Hang on to it." They went on side by side, Adam's arm affectionately over Perkin's shoulder, his tousled, sandy head close to Perkin's neat black one. The Abbey of St. Alban was like a city in itself. Here in these vast, piled-up buildings, nearly 800 monks prayed and worked and studied, and an army of lay brothers labored to make their holy life possible. Besides the houses the monks needed, there were the abbot's palace, where he entertained nobles and churchmen, and sometimes the king himself. The guest house where lesser folk might stay, the almonry where the poor were fed, and the school. Then there were also the stables and barns and granaries, the laundry and dairy and mill and smithy. Most important of all, towering up into the June sky, was the heart and center of it all, the Abbey Church, whose bells rang 7 different times every day for services of prayer and praise. Now we have a little bit of a picture of the Abbey, other than the one that I just showed you. as part of the map that's in the front of my book. I don't know if your book has a map, but here's the Abbey. And you can see that it has a lot of buildings as part of it. Okay, now, where was I? Adam and Perkin skirted round the north side of the church, slipped into the herb garden. In one corner, behind some clumps of tall lavender, a monk was working. Adam squatted down and pulled Perkin down beside him. They crept on their hands and knees among the tangy, fragrant plants and wriggled through the hedge on the other side. Beyond the herb garden were the vegetable gardens with rows of green cabbages and leeks and peas and beans, and beyond them, a bit of orchard and fish pond. There they stopped a minute to look at the carp, and Perkin would have thrown some of Nick's bread to them, but Adam said, "No, come on." They had the Abbey wall to climb next. "Give me a leg up," said Adam. It was an old bit of wall down behind the big barn. Up Adam went, a toe here and a finger hold there, the top of the wall on knees and elbows, and a scraped hand down to Perkin to help him up. A tuft of pink valerian, growing out of a crevice, nodded in the breeze and shed its fragrance. Adam sniffed. He loved all the warm, bright, sweet things of the earth. He hated being shut up inside stone walls with the smell of cold and damp and books and woolen robes. So now he sat on the top of the wall and sniffed and let the wind blow through his hair and crinkled his eyes against the sun and thought of nothing at all but felt blissful. "What are we waiting for?" said Perkin, who was not one to waste time. Down below there was the little river. Between it and the wall was a strip of grass and a narrow path. A gnarled willow tree stood with its roots in the water and one branch pressed up against the wall. They swung themselves down by the tree and walked along the path to the bridge. On the other side of the river was the mill and the Fighting Cock's Inn, and the road that passed by Dame Malkin's cottage near St. Michael's Church. Because it was a holiday, the mill was silent and the inn was noisy. "There's a wrestling match going on," cried Perkin. "Let's watch." "Oh, you can if you want," said Adam. "I'd rather go see Nick." "Oh, I don't really want to," said Perkin hastily. The road led past an old Roman town called Verulam. Nothing was left of it now but some crumbling walls and piles of stones with grass growing in the crevices. People had taken some of the old stones and bricks to make new houses. The tower of the Abbey church was built of Roman bricks, and so was Dame Malkin's little cottage. I think that's interesting that they used the stones from the old Roman fortress or village to construct some of the newer buildings. That's recycling back in the 1200s. "When the Romans came," said Adam, "the people who'd always lived here before went underground. They're there still. They're fairies now." "Oh, our parish priest says there aren't any fairies," objected Perkin. "Well, that's what Roger told me," said Adam with finality, and Roger is his dad. Dame Malkin was a widow who lived alone except for her cow and 3 sheep, and 7 hens and her big gray cat and Adam's dog Nick. Adam was always afraid that Nick would forget him between visits and learn to love the old woman best. He whistled as he came near the little thatched house under the big oak tree. At once the door swung open and out rushed a little red whirlwind with flopping ears, big fringy feet, and a frantic tail. Adam went down on his knees. Nick plunged into his arms and toppled him over, and they rolled in the daisies on the grass together. Nick's tongue was in Adam's ear, his feet on Adam's chest, and his silky hair in Adam's face, but only for a minute. Then Nick was off again. He bounced up against Perkin's shins. He ran round and round in great circles over grass and road. He yelped with joy, his long pink tongue hanging out the side of his mouth, and his ears flapping together over the top of his head. There could be no doubt that Nick was glad to see Adam. Dame Malkin had come to the door and stood watching. She was a short, round-faced woman with merry blue eyes and red cheeks. She wore a blue homespun gown, and her white wimple and cap were clean for the holiday. "Go get off the ground, boy," she called to Adam. "You'll roll on your harp and break it. I've been waiting a long time for a tune. Come in, come in." First, Adam had to give Nick the meat he had saved. He made Nick work for it. The little dog had to walk on his hind legs, roll over, and play dead, even when it was set before him. Even though his brown eyes were all but melting with eagerness, he had to wait till Adam gave the signal before he could fall on it and gobble it. "I'm not going to make him do that for my bread," said Perkin. "Oh, yes, you are, too," said Adam firmly. "He's a minstrel's dog. He has to learn to entertain people." He took the bread out of his wallet, handed it to Perkin. He would have liked very much to give it to Nick himself, but of course it was Perkin's bread. "Walk," said Perkin, and held up the hunk of bread. Nick, however, recognized but one master. He stood on his hind legs, but instead of walking as requested, he snatched the bread out of Perkin's hand and made off with it. When he was safely out of reach, he stopped and chewed with his head thrown back. His eyes rolled at the boys till the white showed. If either of them moved, he picked up the rest of the bread and ran a little further away before he stopped and chewed again. He was distinctly laughing at them. Come in, said Dame Malkin. "Let him be, the scamp. It's St. Albans Day." So they went through the low door under the thatch into the little one-room house. It was dim inside. Even though the wooden shutters at the window stood open and the sunshine came in and made a square patch on the hard earth floor, the rafters and the walls were dark with smoke, but otherwise everything was neat and clean. Dame Malkin's bed in the corner was spread with blue coverlet. Her table was scrubbed white. Her oak cupboard against the wall had been rubbed with beeswax till it gleamed. Adam and Perkin sat down on the bench, and she brought out a cake made of white flour and 2 earthenware cups of milk. "Here," she said, "you 2 need fattening more than the spaniel does. Wet your jolly whistle, and then you can sing to me." Nick came padding in and lay down on Adam's feet. The gray cat stepped delicately through the window, gave Nick a look of disdain, and went to sharpen her claws on the leg of Dame Malkin's bed. Adam gulped his milk, ate his cake, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Then he wiped his hand on Nick's silky sides and took his harp from his shoulder. He tightened the strings till they sounded right when he ran his fingers over them. Ripples of music followed his fingers. He wriggled a little with pleasure. "Summer is a-comin' in," he sang in his high, clear voice. "Loud sing cuckoo." He had heard the first cuckoo on a cold, wet day, away back in April, and he had thought then that Roger would come any day. Now June was almost over. The cuckoo had changed his tune and soon would be flying away, and still Roger had not come. "Groweth seed and bloweth mead and springeth the woo-doo." Anything could happen to Roger, and Adam would not know it. Kings and nobles had messengers to carry letters for them, but ordinary people got news slowly and by roundabout ways, if at all. Sing, cuckoo, no," he finished, and even in his own ears his voice sounded plaintive. "Well, give us something merrier," protested Dame Malkin. "You sound as doleful as a hen in the snow." Adam could almost hear his father saying, "Remember, Adam, a minstrel sings what his listeners want to hear. It's not for him to ease his own sorrows or tell his own joys. He's to find out how his listeners are feeling and say it all for them." So now he looked at Dame Malkin and saw that she was feeling holiday happy and wanted someone to joke with her and tease her a little. He grinned and plucked his harp again. "Herefore and therefore I came," he sang, "and for to praise this pretty woman." Dame Malkin pretended to be displeased, but her eyes laughed. She raised her hand as if to clout him over the head. He ducked and went on pointedly. There were three angry. There were a wasp, a weasel, and a woman. Oh, broke the babe, you're as pert as a pie, and I thought you were pining away with Wanhope. I've a mind not to tell you the news I have for you. There was something in the song about a magpie, too, Adam sang. There were three chattering. There were a pie, a jay, and a woman. He stopped abruptly. What news? He said. She folded her arms and hugged herself. Oh, I'm chattering now, am I? Well, I don't know about telling any news. I don't know at all. Have you heard something about Roger the minstrel? No, boy, not for certain sure, but it might be something. A messenger came through yesterday with the badge of the Delisles at his belt and a parchment in his hand for the Lord Abbot. I got it from William the neatherd, who got it from Walker at the well, whose own brother to Harry, the porter at the Abbey gate, that Sir Edmund Delisle with his train will be lying at the Abbey tonight or tomorrow night, and they say Sir Edmund has a new minstrel with him, but from some minstrel school in France. Adam's gray eyes suddenly shone out as if candles had been lighted behind them. He's coming, he cried. Roger's coming. Nick got up, put his paws on Adam's knee, his tail wagging so hard that his sides shook. Now, there was no name mentioned, said the dame warningly. They don't have to say a name, said Adam proudly. He's the only minstrel worth talking about. Where are they coming from? From Colchester. Then they'll come in over the heath. Come on, Perkin, if we go up on the hill, maybe we can see them. Come on, we've got to hurry. Well, they may not come until tomorrow, protested Dame Malkin. It may not be your Roger at all. I only told you to give you hope, not to set you by the ears this way. Adam flung his arm around her neck, hugged her tight. After a little gasp of surprise, she hugged him back, aimed a kiss at his smooth, hard cheek, but kissed the air instead, had better luck with a swift slap at his rear, and ran after him with his harp, which he had left on the table. He slung it over his shoulders, and it banged against his ribs as he ran. Perkin came thudding along behind him, puffing and blowing, and Nick raced in front with flapping ears. Adam now and then gave a leap. He felt as if he could run forever. Well, maybe his father is going to come in, and the book is not going to be about him looking for his father. The next chapter is called Roger, which is his father's name. But it shows a boy standing on his head that I think is probably Adam. And it shows a little dog, probably Nick, but behind it is an odd-looking wagon. It's very ornate, and there's a girl in the window. Now, I think that this wagon could very well be maybe a princely wagon, because you see how ornate it is? And I'm wondering if that girl in there is a princess. But the title of this chapter is named Roger, so I'm a little confused by this picture. We'll find out later. Bye-bye.